What if building a strong brand doesn't require louder marketing, bigger promises, or constant hustle, but instead starts with clarity, empathy, and purpose? Welcome, or hopefully welcome back to The Reluctant Entrepreneur, the podcast where we explore the real stories behind building a business and where practical experience matters more than theory. Today's conversation is about brand storytelling for purpose-driven entrepreneurs, especially those who want their businesses to feel aligned with who they are, not just what the market expects. My guest today is Hanna-Mari Kirs, a brand story strategist and coach who helps empathetic entrepreneurs communicate their value with authenticity and confidence. With more than a decade of experience in product management, marketing, and sales in early-stage startups, Hanna-Mari has seen firsthand how traditional hustle-driven approaches can clash with founders who want to build something meaningful and sustainable. She's the founder of Heroes and Guides, where she focuses on helping entrepreneurs balance empathy and authority in their messaging without resorting to manipulative or hype-driven marketing. As always, this episode is broken into two parts. In the first segment, we'll explore Hanna-Mari's entrepreneurial journey and the experiences that shaped her approach to business. In the second segment, we'll dig into practical insights on brand storytelling and what purpose-driven entrepreneurs should understand about clearly communicating who they serve and why it matters. If you're building a business and want your brand to reflect your values, not just your sales goals, this episode is for you. My conversation with Hanna-Mari, all the way from Estonia, begins right now. Stick around. Hanna-Mari, thanks for being my guest today. It's late where you are.
Quite. Yes. It's 9 p.m.
9 p.m. Well, thank you for staying up late and getting us to a good recording time. I'm at least on my end, it's a good recording time. Sorry it's so late for you. What are you?
That's all right.
9 hours difference? It is.
I believe so.
Yes. As I'm sitting here, it's 11:14 a.m. So
There you go.
There you go.
10, actually.
10, yes. Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, 10 hours. Well, it's a big world. Yesterday, I was in Scotland. Today, I'm in California. So I don't even know. My body has no clue what time it really is. So that's just the way it is.
So basically, it doesn't matter.
Exactly.
Either way.
Before founding, well, first of all, let me ask you, Heroes and Guides. I love that company name. Can you give me the background on how you came up with that name? I mean, were there specific heroes? Were there specific guides? Where does that come from?
It is a specific spin on basically the idea that has been around for quite a while, but I think was most recently popularized by Donald Miller. I don't know if you've heard of the author and speaker and teacher on the subject of brand storytelling. But basically, the premise of it is that the old paradigm of the company being kind of the hero, like, look at us, we've been in business for such a long time, and you should trust us because we've done all those amazing things, and all of our customers are talking about us in this incredibly amazing way, is really not what the customers are seeking, right? So we're not looking for, tell me how you're amazing. We're looking for, tell me how you can make me amazing, right? And so we need to switch this around and understand that it is not the company that is the hero, but it is the customer who is the hero. And so the company's role is to be the guide. And so that's where the name came about, basically, Heroes and Guides. So it's this relationship between the company and the customers.
I am so glad we're talking today because your approach to storytelling, marketing-based storytelling, or storytelling-based marketing, I should say, resonates with me because we were the hero, or at least we thought we were the hero, the superhero, not just a regular hero, a superhero, a chest-pounding, in your face, we're the best, everyone else sucks. That was pretty much our marketing campaign for maybe a decade and a half. And we got orders, so we figured, okay, it's working, But, even a broken clock is is accurate twice a day. So, that we were successful in spite of those marketing efforts. In fact, it probably held us back. And fortunately, we got to the point where we got tired of the sound of our own voice. And because every year it had to get louder. And every time we did a trade show or a conference, we had to beat ourselves. We were competing with ourselves in our imagination. And it was, I look back now at some of our old ad campaigns and cringe. They were complete cringe-worthy efforts. But it took us to where we are now, so which seems to align with what we're going to be talking about today. Before founding Heroes and Guides, you spent over a decade working in product management, marketing, and sales within early stage startups. What originally drew you into that world before you started your company?
So it's a very kind of a very spirally road, I should say, because I'm somebody who um, put kindly would be called a generalist. Put more medically has ADHD tendencies, right? So probably I think all entrepreneurs everywhere have some sort of neurodivergence to them, or they wouldn't be doing what they're doing, I believe. But basically, it was a very winding road to I'm trained actually, or I went to uni for special education, which drew me in with its absolutely marvelous syllabus of basically all the human, kind of sides and how do you understand the human being, from psychology to medical studies and so on. And I graduated it knowing that I was never going to be a teacher in that realm because it was not something that I necessarily wanted to pursue. But it gave me this very unique understanding of how humans learn and how do we basically tick from the inside out, right? And so I was thinking of what I wanted to do with my life if I didn't want to be a teacher. And as luck would have it, I just had this amazing opportunity to join an incredibly early stage startup in the fintech realm. We were building a banking service, a mobile banking service for the UK market. And it was an incredible experience because, it basically it the startup world, especially early stage startups, are very much the place for a generalist. So you can put all your different talents to work in all the different ways that you can dream of. So one day you might be, sitting in with VCs on investor meetings, writing copy, driving the product, doing mock-ups, designing something or the other. I was even on the support staff for a little while there at the beginning because we were understaffed on the support lines when we launched and so on. So it gave me this really, really amazing holistic experience of how do you run a company and how do you start it. And so I was fortunate enough to be there for the ride and kind of like put my efforts into growing this company from literally nothing and zero customers and just a handful of people to hundreds of thousands of customers across Europe and hundreds of millions in investments and all the rest of it. So it was an amazing experience. And so from there I worked with an agency, basically doing product management product development for other companies, and I was in sales there because I wanted to kind of round up my experience with sales knowledge as well. And from there, I have just been working with different kind of fintech and just early stage startups as well. Before founding my own company in brand storytelling, so I was working as a freelancer to kind of project manage and product manage their different efforts in kind of getting their launches right and yeah, just basically getting to market or scaling to new markets and so on. So yeah, it's been a bit of a ride.
Yeah, I'll bet. At what point did you start to feel, if you did feel this way, maybe a tension between traditional startup hustle culture and how you personally wanted to work and lead. Did that kind of boil over at some point? Was it increasingly clear to you that that's not a direction you wanted to continue with?
Mhm. I think the tension was there from the very beginning because there was always that side of me that was like, do we really need to sleep faster? And is there a better way to do things? And because, the startup culture, let's say 15 years ago, was still very much sort of like a broy place to be. And I don't think that too much has changed in that regard. When it comes to, let's say, classic startups, right? So where you build SaaS product or whatever else, right? Um, so the tension was definitely always there. And I think I was trying to find my way through as a young, person wet behind the ears. You're kind of going with the flow and kind of trying to figure out like, okay, this doesn't necessarily sit well with me, but I feel like, I'm a lone voice in the desert, sort of like, kind of going with it, thinking like, oh, okay, so now I'm in the actual, real world, out of uni, out of school. That must be it, right? And so I would start to hear from here and there different ways of doing things, right? So, for instance, how do you do OKRs, with John Doerr and voices like Simon Sinek, for instance, with very much the purposeful kind of purpose-led, purpose-driven, have a heart, have a core to your business sort of philosophies,
Yeah, he's all
and
about the
that's where I was like,
why,
oh,
right? He's all about the why.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And so those were the kind of like, oh, I think there must be something bigger, and I think there must be something a little bit more, that maybe the world is not ready for this complete change just now, but I can be a change agent perhaps in certain ways. And I think that showed in my leadership as well as I was leading teams, um, of multi-talented, and kind of cross-functional people throughout my different roles. I think that definitely showed in my leadership and in the way that I, did sales and in the way that I was, working with all of those different startups later on as well.
I left industry to start my own company, and I worked for a startup. I was their first employee, and startup culture to me is amazing. It's adrenaline. It's not sustainable. It'll kill a company if they don't. It's like trying to be a teenager forever, right? We've all met friends who should not be acting the way they're acting. They're way too old to be wearing what they're wearing and saying what they're saying, but they're desperately holding on to their youth. And I think that businesses share the same road. When I left my employer and started my company, they were not happy with that concept of what happened. So they sued me, and they lost, of course. But one of the things they sued me for was copying their business model, that I learned certain things that I would not have learned that benefited my business had I not worked there previously. And I remember they asked me when I was up on the witness stand, very TV dramatic Law and Order kind of moment, did I take any of, did I learn anything that I would not have learned had I not worked there? And I'm like, yes, of course. And they thought, aha, gotcha. And they said, what did you learn? I said, I learned what not to do. I looked at all the mistakes this company made, and I thought, if I ever start my own company, if I just avoid doing what they did, I have a better chance of success. So yes, I was very inspired. It was a negative inspiration, but it was an inspiration nonetheless. Did you have a similar experience? Not to put down your early employer at all, but did you learn as much from their mistakes as you did from their successes?
Oh, for sure. I think nobody can come away from any sort of experience if you're half as analytical as the average person. I think you would still, come away with massive learnings. It is the time you need to take, obviously, to synthesize those learnings. And I think one of the things that helped me a lot was I read quite a bit during the time just to make sense of my own experience there. And because I was also a very, very young leader and I had imposter syndrome to the max, and I was like, oh my God, how can I lead people if I've never been led before? I have no idea how to lead a team. So what do I do? Okay, I'm going to learn as much as I can from, books and trying to understand and make sense of my experiences. But I think the biggest thing really for me was that being inspired by all of those thought leaders in the space and kind of putting this like, side by side with the experience that I was getting was that business is not a zero-sum game. And we've been taught that it is. Like your experience, I think, exemplifies that really beautifully because there's this thing where we think that we're going to run out of leeway or we're going to run out of that sort of, the benefits of what we offer or that is kind of like if you walk away with that knowledge that you got, we are going to be poorer for it, which is ridiculous.
Hmm.
And so that I think is the shift that we're seeing right now in the business landscape. I think across the globe really is that we start to understand that just because somebody learned something while they were with us, unless they are taking our patented product and trying to sell it as their own, the synthesis of, okay, we taught them something and now they're going off and doing something in that realm and pushing things forward. I think that is really, really important. And that's where I start with all of my clients as well, is trying to understand what is the thing that you would still keep doing if everything was taken away from you. Like if you lose your business, your customer base, your everything, what would you still be doing? What would you still be interested in trying to solve in the world? And that's, I think, really important because it's not like each and every one of us has a very like different purpose in life. When you distill things down, we, come to very similar things. Somebody's trying to do something in the medical space. Somebody's trying to eradicate poverty. Somebody's trying to, make sure that we're mentally healthier. Whatever else it is, right? So it distills down to certain categories, perhaps, and it's not a zero sum game trying to, no, this is my area. Like get out of my area. This is my area. This is the thing that I'm doing. Why are you stealing my purpose? Right? It's the thing is like, okay, I'm trying to make money doing this because I think that the world should be like that. And so if you believe the same thing, that the world should be like that, then Godspeed building your own
Yeah.
business and doing this in parallel, right? And we can kind of like be competitors and we can push each other, right? But it's about the end goal. It's not about, just kind of like you stealing my customers away.
Yeah, it's a great perspective, and that takes quite a bit of maturity to get to that point, which I lacked in the early days of my business. Now, it's a different story, but um, sometimes I think when you start a business, the competitive nature comes in there. I used to have this very warped view of win-win. We all talk about everything should be win-win. My view of win-win back in the early days was if I got an order, I won. And the fact that my competitor lost an order, I won again. So I thought, it was brutal. It was sometimes I would take an order at a price that made absolutely no sense, but I felt secure in the fact that they didn't get it. In actuality, looking at a 30,000 foot view, I did them a favor. I prevented them from losing money. I was willing to take the hit just so that I had another feather in my cap or notch on my belt, whatever tally system we have. And that's why I think where ego really gets in there, right? I ran a company for several years, largely based on ego. And I think ego has a place, particularly in the early startup days. I mean, you've got to have a little bit of an ego to think that your business will be in the 20% of all businesses that statistically are successful, and not in the 80% of all business startups that are ultimately failures. So you got to have some degree of that ego. But that ego for me was both my propeller and my anchor. And at some point, it was not just a net zero sum game, it was a negative game, a negative gain. At some point, I had to say, okay, thanks, ego. You got me going. That was the adrenaline. It was the dopamine. It was just the burst of energy that I needed. Time to shift into a different gear. It's like trying to drive a car 1,000 kilometers in first gear. First gear is you can't start in fifth gear. You have to start in first, highly leveraged, but you can't go far in that. And to me, that's the ego is the first gear of getting up to speed. And then at some point, you got to go into overdrive, right? Sorry for the
Yeah.
motorhead analogies there, but I'm on a roll.
No, I mean that is 100%. Like that makes so much sense, and I'm not one like for sure. I'm not here to say that the startup culture is evil and
Oh
it
no.
has no place or none of that, because ultimately, exactly, that is the driver. That is the driver. At the time that I joined the startup, I didn't have that in me to start my own company, right? That was not who I was at the time. And it's that, the people leading that company were the fire, right? They were the fire in the engine. They were the combustion needed to get us going, really, right? And so I think it's just the question of what I've seen is obviously, as you said, the propeller and the anchor, and at the same time you need like a balancing voice in there. You need the balancing voice of like, okay, but yes, absolutely, let's go forward. Let's keep going, but also let's just take a step back for a moment. Let's zoom out and let's see what's actually going on. So I am definitely, the more I do spot the mistakes. I do get fixated on let's analyze this. Let's see what's happening. Let's pick this apart. And others are saying like, yes, but if we just sit here picking things apart, we're never going to move, right? So in that sense, I'm uh if I do say so myself, I'm a great ally to have once things have actually started to go. And so I can like say, okay, let's make things more efficient. When there's a little bit of scale, when there's a little bit of,
Yeah.
momentum already going, then it's a very good place for me to come in and say like, okay, let's take stock of what's been working, what's not been working, and let's maybe just zoom out for a little bit, because now we understand what's going on in the business, right? So I've been reading this book. I have a son, so I've been reading this book by Professor Scott Galloway called Notes on Being a Man. And he says something really profound in there, which was that don't follow your passion, follow your talent. And so once you follow your talent, you will develop passion for the things that you're talented in. And so that for me is like, that actually makes so much sense, because we've been taught to follow your passion. And then if your passion changes, all of a sudden you're like lost and what's going on. Or the thing that you're passionate about is not necessarily something that others need or whatever it is, right? But you can always make something out of talent, I think. And so it's kind of the same thing. It's kind of like, let's get going, and now let's see where we actually are, and where is it that we're giving the most value to the world here, right? Because otherwise we're going to get stuck in trying to figure out our philosophy and our why and our slogans that are this and are that, and it can get really, really, we could just go into analysis paralysis. So I think that that's
Yeah.
really important to really keep in mind, right? So there's nothing wrong with a healthy dose of ego and competitiveness and all the rest of it, right? As long as we are still kind of anchored in the core of our business. And I think also something that I have come to learn is that we are entering into this transformation era, as opposed to sort of the service based or the experience based eras that we have been previously, which means that our customers expectations are also changing. That means that they're not just looking for who can give me the best experience as I work with them or as I buy their product.
Mhm.
They're looking for how can your specific product or service give me the transformation that I'm after, whether it's professional, personal. Ultimately, all of it boils down to personal transformation, I think. Um, but it's we're seeking for the change. Are you the right person to take me by the hand and kind of like lead me through the change, or give me the tools, give me the frameworks, give me the resources that I need to get from A to B and to transform myself in the way that I envision myself transforming. So that's where that whole storytelling comes in really strongly as well, in my opinion.
Yeah, we're going to get into the details of and the fine print within the storytelling in a moment. Before I go there, I want to ask you. You talked about imposter syndrome. You talked about ADHD, and we're all a little nutty to think we can survive in this world of entrepreneurship. How have you, in general, overcome challenges? There are, imposter syndrome's one in maybe 1,000 or more challenges that you will have faced or you will face in the future. What's your secret weapon for overcoming those challenges and allowing perseverance to outweigh burnout?
Mm. Um, it's a very interesting question. Because ultimately it comes down to your personality very much as well. I am, you know, I do have my fair share of sort of like, as I said before, neurodivergent, let's say, aspects to myself. Um, but I think I'm on the one hand, I'm very much a self-development junkie. Like I can go all out. I, do the therapies, I do the different kind of explore different ways for me to ground myself better and to kind of understand myself better and to work with my anxious prone mind and so on. I think that's really important to kind of go deep into yourself, and you need to balance that with action, and that's really important. You just have to keep going. If something is not working out necessarily in the way that you want, or that you're doubtful about, am I doing the right thing? Is this what I want to do? What is the meaning of my value in this company and so on? Which I definitely had quite a lot in the early days of my career. You just need to keep going. You need to keep going, shift something, do something a little bit differently, see if that works. Volunteering is a massively helpful aspect. So if you don't necessarily want to change your job, find ways that you could volunteer in, let's say, adjacent fields, something that would still be kind of, relevant to your experience. But I, for one, was involved with a company, or not a company, sorry, an organization called Tech Sisters here in Estonia, which is an organization that supports women in tech and kind of girls getting into tech earlier and so on.
Hmm.
That was so helpful. That was incredible because I had so many public speaking gigs, so many opportunities to meet amazing people and visit amazing companies and so on. So I think, yeah, as I said, I think action is definitely something that you need to take, kind of like have this internal moment of like, what's going on? What do I need? And then also just follow it up with the next step.
You now work primarily with empathetic, purpose-driven entrepreneurs. When did you first recognize that this was the audience that you were uniquely positioned to help? What that you realized you were drawn to that? Was that always the case, and you finally realized it, or did you have a epiphany moment, or what brought
I
you
think
there?
it was a yes. So I think definitely it was a moment where hmm, let me put it this way. First of all, I think we all find ourselves on the spectrum somewhere of like, whatever like this empathetic, heart-led this is means to us, right? But the people who recognize themselves in what you just said in terms of my my target and the people that I love working with. I think it's the question of so there's a couple of things. First of all, it is the fact that we just see the world in a similar way. So oftentimes, in the startup kind of experiences that I've had, there's been this thing where um, I often find myself going against the grain, trying to explain something that is obvious to me, but not necessarily obvious to the person who is, sitting across from me. And I'm trying to, explain to the CEO, I think we should be doing things in a slightly different way. Perhaps we shouldn't be comparing ourselves against the competitor and seeing everything that they're doing. Maybe we should actually be focusing on our customer instead. Like, I don't want to have to explain those very foundational principles to
Right.
the people that I'm working with, right? So that's one thing um, in terms of who I love working with, but also um, the empathetic, heart-led sort of people who have very strong values and they feel like I want to do things in a certain way tend to get stuck in building their businesses because they don't want to be pushy. They don't want to be sleazy. They don't want to be broy. They don't want to have to force anybody or coax anybody or manipulate anybody into buying their products or services. And they have this feeling of if I do things in a certain way, I'm going to be sleazy. I'm going to lose my voice. I'm going to lose my sense of core, right? And so they feel like if they don't want to use those sleazy tactics, that means that they're losing out on customers. And that means that they cannot, scale as well, or they cannot, grow as much as the next company. And so that to me is a fundamental problem I want to help solve because ultimately it's a question of can we help those purposeful, heart-led entrepreneurs be the majority of entrepreneurs, right? Building businesses from their hearts and kind of the way that they want to, and with soul and with really strong values. Um, and so that's kind of the world that I'm working towards, making sure that we could have more of those entrepreneurs kind of have stronger voices, have stronger platforms, scale better, be more sustainable with their businesses. And so that's where I'm putting my effort.
I love that you realized relatively early on the type of customer that was ideal for you. When I started my business, anyone with a pulse and a balance in their bank account was my type of customer. And
Oh,
we attracted great customers and toxic customers. We attracted them all. And of course, the ones you make the least money on take all of your energy and time, moving forward. When we switched to choosing our customers as much or more than our customers choose us, when we led with value, storytelling, education, building authority, becoming an influencer, an authority-based influencer, we started attracting a whole different level of customers that were attracted to that messaging that we were putting out. And we managed to change our process from transactional to relational. Not, we didn't set out with that intent. We just, I just noticed the change as we made the change. If someone did say to me, my business mentor said to me, and she came up with this concept of, if you want to sell more stuff, just shut up. Stop talking about your stuff. No one cares about your stuff. And she said it in much more graphic terms than that. And I thought she was crazy. I'm like, you're nuts. And I would tell her that. I don't know why, we paid her good money. Maybe that's why she stayed. But she had to fight with me for probably a few years before I started to see it. So you saved yourself a ton of work by starting with clients that already have that basic mindset of empathy and all of that. The person I worked with had to spend a long time listening to all my BS about how she's crazy and how those ideas are stupid and they'll never work. And, it's kumbaya. It's like smoke the peace pipe. It just seemed very new agey. I'm very analytical. I absolutely survive on causation. I need to know how everything works. I've been that way since I was a child. I just need to understand how things work. And when she said, if you want to sell more stuff, stop talking about your stuff, that had no straight line to me. I could not find causation. Now we do all these, what I've used to call crazy things, and it works. It works so well. That has become my causation. I don't need to understand why it works. I just know if I follow the recipe, I don't need to know what causes bread to rise from a chemistry standpoint. I just know if I have yeast and flour and eggs and whatever and put it in the oven for a length of time at a certain temperature, it will rise, it will form a cake or a loaf of bread or whatever. That is all I need to know. And it's kind of a trust the process thing, which is hard to do for people like me because I want to understand the process. And if I don't agree with the process, I deny it for a long time. But I think you're wise in already knowing the type of customer that you'd prefer to work with and that you could be more successful with, right? They can be more successful.
Well, the thing is, I didn't, wake up knowing this. It's been
Right.
12 years of, being in those board meetings and those rooms of like, let's start, discussing our marketing and sales strategy and let's try to figure out like why our product is not doing well. And trying to get through to the people that I'm talking to who are very much in the school of where you used to be. And it's in a way, like, first of all, again, understandable that has been the case because the whole business ecosystem was very much built on that same mentality. Also, the customers didn't know to expect anything different. That's how you do business. You go to a business, then they explain to you exactly how they work and why they work and what's, what they're doing and why they're the best in the business and so on. And that's when you decide which business you want to work with. Today, because the shift has started to happen, it started to happen quite gradually, I think, a couple of decades ago. But now we're in this massive momentum of people don't want to, like, we have very little capacity for other people's stories when it comes to kind of our transformation, I think. They are very good in certain situations and when I'm working with clients as well. It's obviously there's the transformational stories of others to inspire you and so on. But this is not, I don't come to you to ask you, like, explain to me why you're the best in the business. I'm asking you, explain to me exactly what you're going to do with me. What can we do together so that I can become the person that I want to become? And so that you cannot do by explaining to them how amazing you are. And Donald Miller in his book as well describes the whole, biology evolutionarily speaking, right? In a very beautiful way. Basically, he says that, that people are selfish. Our brains are selfish. Well, this is my translation of it anyway, because our brains were built to survive, and once survival was kind of established, it was, they were built to thrive and figure out the ways that we can thrive. And so if we're not speaking to the brain in that way, with our storytelling, they're not listening, they're tuning out because they're like, oh, okay, here's another, as he puts it, it's like, oh, here's another hero like me. But I'm looking for a guide. So I'm going to go and search for a guide, somebody who can actually like show me exactly, not boast about what they've done, but really show me as a guide. Right. So, um, yeah, just kind of take me through my transformation.
Do you get a lot of pushback from clients about embracing storytelling as a marketing strategy? I mean, does it some the way I used to think, storytelling, what are we going to read nursery rhymes to our clients? Are we really telling stories? Once upon a time, do all our marketing messages start with once upon a time? And clearly it's not that, but how would you help perhaps a small business or a solo entrepreneur understand the concept and the benefits of storytelling? I mean, I guess one way could be, what are you doing now? Is that working? Right? So it's different. But besides just being different, how do you describe to someone who might be a little bit cynical the benefits of authentic-based, value-based storytelling as a marketing strategy?
Well, I love to quote Seth Godin here because that's one of my favorite quotes, and that's something that I use often with my clients as well. I tell them, Seth Godin said, people don't believe what you tell them. They sometimes believe, or they seldom believe what you show them. They sometimes believe what their friends tell them, but they always believe what they tell themselves.
Hmm.
Right? So that becomes kind of the premise of, okay, so it's not about me telling you a story and then it's all like me based, but it's like, how can I start to change the story you're telling yourself from the first moment you come to my site or to whatever we're working on, right? To like in contact with my brand, how can I start to change the story you have about yourself? And that's where the sale happens, right? That's where the trust is built. It's not in the space between us, but it's really about what you believe about me. Do you believe that I can, give you this transformation? Do you believe that together we can work on this? Or, I'm the brand that you need in order to achieve something that you want. And it's very subconscious. It's very, it's gradual. It comes on gradually. It's either I trust you or I don't trust you. And so this is where the framework comes in. And yeah, you're right. Obviously, it doesn't start with like once upon a time. It's more about like how can we address the questions that they have without them needing to ask them, without them even understanding that they needed to know those answers, right? So like how can we take you through one step at a time through your own internal decision making process so that you understand that I can actually be here for you for whatever transformation it is that you're seeking, right? Whether it's in coaching practices, whether you're teaching something, whether you are running a certification program, um, whatever else it is, right? So it's that internal process that we need to sort of guide in them, and it's not a it addressing the point of manipulation, I think, as well, is really, really important. Because ultimately, if you believe that you have something that your clients need, and oftentimes my clients come from backgrounds of like, I've done this for 20, 30 years, and now I'm ready to put this online and I want to help others who have come through those situations or are in the midst of those situations, and I want to help them. Certification programs are really, really good example there, teaching somebody to become a breathwork practitioner, for instance, or a guide, or yoga instructions and so on. It's kind of like, do you believe that people need what you have to say and that you have to teach them? So again, kind of helping them through that with like, okay, step by step, let's use the framework of storytelling. Let's try and understand, how do we get the story going in their minds? How do we start to like, what is it that they're telling themselves now? It's very important to understand, what is it that your client is telling themselves now, and how can you change that story? That's, that story-based marketing.
What are the common mistakes entrepreneurs make in storytelling? Is there, you know, is there a misperception on what the Hanna-Mari version of storytelling is versus what may perceive it to be? You know, and I'll give you an example. When my company switched from traditional marketing strategies, cringeworthy traditional marketing strategies, to what we do now, there was another player in our space that saw what we were doing, creating a whole bunch of content. So they thought, okay, we're going to start creating a whole bunch of content. Our content was absent of any commercial. There was no CTA. There was no call to action. It was value-based, authority-based. We identified technical issues that our industry was having and best practice solutions to address those issues. That's it. It stopped there. They basically just created a storytelling project that was a sales pitch in the form of a video, as opposed to an ad, stationary ad. So they thought that our secret to our success was the fact that we created video content, well executed video content. It wasn't the medium that was successful. It was the message that was successful. We could have sent smoke signals up, and if someone could read smoke signals, we would have been just as successful. So are there similar types of mistakes or other types of mistakes that you see people make if they say, "Yeah, I read a book about storytelling, and rather than regular marketing, we're just going to try it"? What do you see there? What do you see the misperceptions are and the mistakes that people might make without some solid advice?
I think the biggest mistake I've seen companies make across the board really is that they have a product, or the founder has an idea for a product, and then they jump in creating that product because it sounds really, really amazing in their minds. And then they kind of get things running. Perhaps they can convince a couple other people that this is an amazing idea, perhaps get some investments on board, and so on. And then the customer aspect comes as like the third, fourth, fifth thought. And that's where they start to go like, okay, let's try to sell it. Let's try to market it now. How can we spin it in a way that it matches customer expectations? Rather than how can we build a thing that our customers need? So then kind of the whole storytelling or whichever marketing sort of framework we decide to use becomes just the thing that we will need to figure out later on, but we know that we're building something that our customer actually needs. And I think that is the biggest problem that I have seen. Now, if you are in a business that you obviously have traction, you obviously have, you're selling something that, your customers are actually purchasing already. You're already getting something right. That means that there's need there. And perhaps you're just thinking, but my competitors are doing so much better in terms of their business, or I want this to be much more scalable. I feel like there's revenue to be recovered from our, processes and so on. That's where we can talk about like, okay, let's have a look at what your customers are attracted to right now. What are they getting from your services and products? And most importantly, what is it that they are like? Let's look into what they're actually saying. What kind of problems they're trying to solve with your offerings? What is it that they're telling themselves about those things? Like what are they telling themselves about the problem that they're having? What kind of language they're using? Um, and there's so much. If you are on social media at all, obviously there's a lot of research that is just right there sitting in your comment section. Basically you can go in and try and figure out like, okay, what are my customers saying? What are they reacting to? How are they relating themselves to my product? And so I think that's the biggest thing, is kind of like doing it backwards. Now, again, as I said before, I'm not saying that you need to sit down and figure out everything, kind of like in a vacuum. And before you even start, no, by all means, have a direction. This is where kind of the core of the business comes in. Like, what would you be doing if if everything just went away and kind of like was taken away from you, and would you start again, and what would you start again doing? What would be the main thing that you're trying to achieve in the world? And so that needs to be there. And then you kind of bring in like, okay, what kinds of, the kind of like, okay, what kind of product, what kind of customers? It's kind of like a dance, right? It's this cycle that starts to repeat itself, like, put something out, get some feedback. Okay, but you have to get the feedback. There are so many companies that I have seen in my time in the startup ecosystem that have just started as an amazing idea in somebody's opinion. They've done all these things. They have a beautifully designed, built, very solid product that then ends up being absolutely no value at all because they just forgot to kind of like, oh, oops, we kind of had to talk to a couple of customers there. So that's, in my opinion, the biggest mistake that I've seen companies make and are still making, I'm afraid.
Let's assume, and it could be a valid assumption, that there's someone in my audience watching or listening to this episode that says, yeah, I like what Hanna-Mari is saying. I agree with the concept of storytelling-based marketing, authentic, empathetic marketing. I am not a content creator. No part of me feels comfortable in front of a camera or writing a script or sitting in front of a microphone or behind a lectern. What do I do? How do you take it from I agree to action?
The beauty, in my opinion, with brand storytelling is that it provides this amazing framework, and like I like to equate it to a spine. Do you have like a spine to your company and to your brand? And storytelling provides it really beautifully. And again, you kind of you mentioned a couple of means there, but it's not that you have to then stand up at a podium and cite your brand story. Everything that you do in your business becomes a story suddenly,
Right.
right? Because
You
the
are
first
the
step that I
story.
do,
You are the
exactly,
story.
and
Yeah.
everything that you're putting out there, does it align? Is it aligned with what you said last week, or does it change because suddenly you got this, you know, a different customer in mind, and now you're speaking to them suddenly, and I'm like, I wonder, am I even a part of your audience anymore, or like what's going on here? So the fact that you can keep persistently talking to the same people and kind of talking to their problems and talking to their needs, right? That is a part of brand storytelling. The fact that you're like, okay, I stand for this. Whatever comes, I always stand for this. And whatever I talk about, if I talk about the weather, if I talk about my products, if I talk about, if you tend like decide to dip your toe into the political landscape and take a stance in one way or the other, that is the basis of your values, right? So that's the foundation that you're building your company on. And so it doesn't matter whether it is you speaking for your company, if you're a company of 300, 3,000 people, whatever, and you have other people speaking for your company and representing, right? They have to understand what they stand for. They have to understand what your company stands for. And that's where it becomes this absolutely irreplaceable framework. Again, whether you want to kind of, whether you're the kind of person who wants to go out and to tell a story, on a podcast or whatever, your website has to tell the same story as does your social media, as do your employees here and there. Um, and what's even more important in this day and age is that if you are in any way talking to AI, which I think probably 99% of entrepreneurs these days are, right? You will start to get, you will understand the difference of what AI is telling you if you have fed it your very structured brand story framework before, or if you have not, then you have just, you're
Yeah.
shooting from the hip and kind of like going like, oh, I'm in this space. This is my general, like these are products that I'm selling. It has very little ground to stand on and give you very specific custom sort of content, right? But if you feed it your brand story, you are so crystal clear on what you
Mhm.
stand for. You can also call out AI, which will start giving you crap, you know. before long, right? And you said, you're missing the mark here because I don't sound like that. My voice is like this, check yourself. And it goes like, oh, sorry. Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
But if you're not checking, it just spirals you into this thing and you go and you go and you go and you go down that rabbit hole. Suddenly you understand like, wait, that's not my voice. That doesn't feel right, but you're not able to put your finger on why it doesn't feel right.
Yeah, it reminds me of back in the day when we used copy machines, Xerox type copy machines, and you took a copy of a piece of paper, and then copied the copy, and then copied the copied copy, and by the time you get to about 10 generations, you can't read it anymore. But between each version of the copy is just a small degradation. And I noticed, because I use AI quite a bit to research my guests, it's better than looking at 27 different websites and drilling down. It can summarize stuff for me. But I had to train it, and it took a few efforts reprompting, because I don't think it forgets. I think it intentionally lowers its understanding of you, to only provide information based on verifiable facts. Because sometimes it will hallucinate. Sometimes it will assume that because Hanna-Mari is into empathetic stuff like that, she is also a yoga master. It'll just make stuff up, because 90% of storytellers are into yoga. Whatever it will just assume it. And I have to constantly, I shouldn't say constantly, but regularly instruct it facts only with citations so I can double check it. And it will use phrases like, here's the information you're asking for in your voice. And it does a good job. But you're right. It's like that second, third, fourth, fifth generation copy. If you don't give it the original instruction again, it degrades just a little bit every time you use it. And
yeah, absolutely.
We're almost out of time. So, go ahead, Hanna.
Yeah, just one more thing to that. If you're using freelancers to do any sort of work for you, whether that's design, whether that's copywriting or doing presentations, whatever it is, if you don't have, I like to call it, if you don't have your story straight, right? You can only give them vague instructions, and then they come back to you and you're like, yeah, it's not exactly like, didn't I tell you that you should be doing? And they say like, no, that, you assume that I knew, but it's not written down anywhere. And you kind of go back and forth and you go like, oh, again, I'm going to do it myself because nobody understands my brand the way that I understand my brand, because you haven't put in the work to really make sure that people understand it, whether that's, your actual personal assistant or designer, copywriter, whoever, or whether that's AI. And so these days, especially, you have to be very clear on who you're serving, why you're doing that, in what voice, with which values, and all of that is brand storytelling. And if you know that deeply, I think you're gonna be golden in this day and age.
I agree. You host a podcast. You are also a podcast host. You work on both sides of the microphone, so to speak. Today you're a guest, but you also host the Empathetic Advantage podcast. What's that about?
So that's actually one of the things that I needed to correct you on, because
Oh, good.
that's something
Okay.
that's on pause right now. So that was also in the bio or in the intro section. You had mentioned it. I don't think that we talked about it, or otherwise I would have said. I'm just wondering where that came up.
Are you going
Because
to? Yeah, I don't know that we can blame AI for that. That's
oh,
probably where it
maybe.
came from. And
Yeah. Okay.
is it on pause with the expectation it's going to come back, or I can just not ask you about
I
that at all?
I think it's easier if you don't, just because, like, yeah, there are some episodes there that are up, but they're a couple of years old now. I just ran out of time to do it, and I was like, okay. I think that's
Okay.
maybe a little bit more resource heavy than I would have expected, and so
Yeah.
right now I don't know if I
Well,
will be
maybe I'll
bringing it
ask you
back
this
anymore.
then. I'll ask you that you used to host a podcast. I won't say the name of it. You used to host a podcast. The question was going to be, what reoccurring themes did you see come up among empathetic entrepreneurs across. No, I'm going to leave that. I'm going to leave that out.
I mean, you can ask it from a perspective of my clients, but maybe it's
that's
a similar question to
that's kind of a rabbit hole one. I
the
don't.
mistakes.
Yeah, I don't want to get my audience Googling the Empathetic Advantage podcast and not finding it. Okay, here's a good one. So we're almost out of time. Just a couple more questions. Based on your own journey, what advice would you give to an entrepreneur who feels successful on paper but misguided in practice?
Oh. So do you mean like somebody who feels like they're a little bit, what they're doing doesn't necessarily feed their soul in the way that they would hope? Is that what you're asking?
They have all the check boxes. They're talking about their product. They're talking about the advantages. They're doing all the things that a business school might say, for a marketing degree. They're doing all of that. They're fitting right in with their competition in terms of visibility and all that. But it's just not clicking with the industry or with them. They just feel like it's all right from an MBA standpoint. We're there, but it's something, I don't know, less satisfying or less successful. Does that make sense?
I
guess the question would be, what advice would you give to someone who goes, Hanna-Mari, I'm doing everything the Harvard Business School taught me to do, and I'm just not connecting. No one understands who we are. If they only understood who we are, we would be way more successful. What advice would you give them in that scenario?
So it really depends on whether you already have any sort of traction or not. So if you had any sort of traction, it must mean that you're resonating with your clients on some level. So you got to understand what level that is. And so it's easy to do that because you just have to get in contact with some of your customers. And that's one thing that I just like. There's never I want to say that there's never like enough information that you can gain about your customers. Yes, you can get too stuck on listening to everybody and they might have opposing views, and then, you might be spinning your wheels and not getting anywhere. But I think that there is, in this day and age, the companies who are going to come out on top just know more about their customers. They understand them better. They understand how to, which way the market is going and how the customer expectations are changing. Because ultimately, it's like if you don't have any customers, you don't have a business, and that's just the hard truth. So, in that sense, just understand where you're providing the biggest value, and try to spot those patterns. And if you're feeling like, I think we're really like, we are providing value for those customers, but we really don't like, working with them. Well, then pivot towards the customers that you actually do enjoy working with, and understand and really go deep into trying to figure out how to give them even more value. And so the people that you don't align with will start to fall away, as you get clearer on that, and as you start to express that more clearly, right? So if you start talking about like, okay, we are for that type of person, and you don't have to say like we don't work with XYZ. You can just keep, repeating yourself in terms of who you do work with. And yeah, if you don't have any customers just yet, um, and you're kind of trying to figure out like, but the idea is so good, like how do I get traction? Um, Again, I would say that go and talk to your customers, the people that you think that you're gonna serve. Hear what they have to say in terms of, is that actually what they need? And if it is what they need, then we can talk about like, okay, maybe it's the messaging that needs tweaking if they're not getting what you're saying.
Yeah, I think it's a lot easier to seek out your perfect customer than it is to try and figure out the type of customers you have, right? Because if you're not setting out to attract a very specific type of customer, you're going to end up with a huge catalog of personality types and values and goals that it's going to be like a library. You're going to have a cataloging system of all the different personality types you have, and various messaging campaigns for each type, as opposed to, we want customers who seek best practice solutions to problems and engage in a partnership as opposed to a transactional event. That alone, when we set that out as a goal, to this is the type of customer we want, and we also have a list of this is the type of customer experience has taught us we do not want. Here are the red flags. It's very obvious. Everyone displays their colors like the flags on a ship. We prefer to not have that type of customer because we are not the best solution for them, nor them for us. And when we switched to really identifying, since we had a vast range of different types of customers, which ones were the most pleasing to us? Which ones were we satisfied working with? Which ones did we impact in a positive way more than others? We thought, okay, perspective gives you that. You go, okay, that didn't work. I don't like that type of customer. I want nothing but this type of customer. And once we kind of realized that, we basically didn't have to tweak our marketing. We just dropped all the other stuff. It's like fishing. There's a certain bait that might attract one type of fish and another bait that would attract another type of fish. We were fishing with a net. We caught everything in that net, and not everything was edible, right? We probably caught spare tires in our net, to use that analogy. Once we started putting the appropriate, and I hate to use the word bait because it's not as contrived as that, but once we put the appropriate lure and we started attracting the perfect type of customer that we really wanted to work with, that's pretty much all we get, because the other people that come to us, we just don't click with them, which is fine. That's what everyone else is for.
And it is. And I think you hit a nail on the head with perspective, right? Because ultimately, if you are not in a place where you would have a massive amount of customers just yet, and if you do, the great thing about it is it's not about we have this, in my opinion, very rigid view of oh, I want to serve women in their 30s who live in New Hampshire, who have 2.5 kids and so on. It doesn't necessarily mean that this is your ideal customer, because the ideal customer can be a cluster of people linked by a couple of common denominators, right? One of them being, very importantly, that you very clearly fix some sort of a problem for them with your product or service. And that's a main common denominator. And then you have things like, okay, so how do we, what's the messaging that really works for them, and so on. But if you don't have a very clear customer base, then something that I really recommend is have a hypothesis. Start with a hypothesis and then allow yourself to be corrected in that, because ultimately, if you very rigidly hold on to, oh, this is our ideal customer, we need to serve that person, and then suddenly it turns out that they don't need what you're selling, or they're not really the most easy to work with client, or they tend to be a little bit more protective of their funds, whereas the other, customer next to them, who is exactly the same, has the exact same values, but is like, oh yes, can you please take my money because I'm so, this pain is so huge, I really need what you're selling. So again, start with a hypothesis, and then, as I said, allow yourself to be guided and to be corrected. Because I started out with trying to figure out oh, maybe my ideal customer is yes, empathetic entrepreneur, but somebody who's just starting out and kind of like me, but perhaps 10 years younger or 5 years younger, or whatever it is. And then I allowed myself to be corrected. That is actually not a starting, very early, entrepreneur. It is more, I can be much more valuable to somebody who's a little bit more established, and we can work with something that's already there. And we can see where that revenue is hiding, and we can actually, where, percentage point in conversion change really yields massive results for you. So yeah.
Last question. How did you define success when you first started your company, and how do you define it today?
I think it's pretty much the same, because the thing is that during the time that I've had my company, I have had, two children, which then means that it's been a sort of like, let's go. And then, okay, I need to take a pause. Okay, let's go. I need to take a pause. And I think it
Children
is,
are grounding for sure. They're
oh,
grounding.
100%
Yeah.
grounding, making you less naive about things that you can achieve. And I think it's about balance, because something that I've been able to achieve with my sort of with my business so far is that I've been able to have good solid projects coming in, and then taking a bit of a time just to be with my family, or welcome another person, into our family, and just take that time out, and just recoup, and then, all right, I'm available again for new clients, and now I can work again. And so that has been, I think that is the measure of success for me. Which is why I said as well, I don't think I have the massive grit of building a business that is, I've never been the person with a vision of like, oh, and then I'm gonna have hundreds of people working for me, and all that. For me, it's like, I'm happy if my business feeds my family and gives me ample time to spend with my kids, and that's success for me. So, and if I can help other companies, kind of recover that revenue for themselves, and understand like, oh, okay, I can actually, ooh, this is where my scale was hiding, right? So this is where I can actually make a difference in my business. um and if that means skating to the moon, absolutely, more power to you. I'll help you get there. And if that means just, scaling more, in a smarter way, and kind of having more help on board, or just simply having more runway, that's absolutely fine as well. So
That's
yeah.
great perspective, and that's perspective that comes with time. I also came to the conclusion that there were times in our history when we were smaller, when I was happier and making more money. And then the next level of scale, because society tells you, and particularly business society, demands growth, like double-digit growth every year. And, Wall Street runs on that, because Wall Street is obviously investor driven. It's shareholder priority, not customer priority today. And they all want dividends. They all want growth. They all want their stocks to rise. And so businesses are making very short-term decisions that are immediate gratification based, not strategic long-term based. And sometimes the best decision, sometimes the most profitable word in business is no. No, thank you.
Mm,
2 words.
100%.
Technically
100%.
3 words there, but at any rate, no, great insight there. For my listeners or viewers who would like to get more information about Heroes and Guides, I know you're in Estonia, but I'm assuming in today's digitally connected world, you probably have clients around the world. Is that the case?
Yeah, it's actually mostly in the US. So
Mostly in the U.S. Excellent. So for
mm,
my listeners and viewers who would like to get more information on Hanna-Mari's company, Heroes and Guides, if you are watching this on YouTube, look down here where it says see more, and you'll have the URL right there. And for those of you who are listening on your favorite podcast app, when it's safe to do so, go to that podcast app and you can click on the link and get right over to Heroes and Guides, Hanna-Mari's website, her company website. Is there anything that you would like to say, and before I let you go, to my audience, any particular call to action or anything that you would like them to know?
yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you so much, Mike, for this amazing conversation. It's been great chatting with you.
Same here.
And to anybody listening, if you want me to have a look at your brand, have a look at what's going on with any sort of your customer journeys, go to heroesandguides.com/reluctant. And so
Oh,
I'll give you a quick audit on what I can see. And so I'll give you a free sort of 3-pointer advice on what I would change in order to make to kind of recover that revenue that might be hiding in your customer journeys. So from a
excellent.
product and storytelling perspective.
heroesandguides.com/reluctant. So there should be no reluctance in following that link. It's a win-win situation. Hanna-Mari, thank you so much for your insight, sharing your insight and your journey. I really appreciate it. One of the great benefits I get from the show is I get to talk to people like yourself. And just when I think I know it all, I realize I'm just scratching the surface. So thanks for filling in all those gaps for me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for joining me on this episode of The Reluctant Entrepreneur. A special thanks to Hanna-Mari for being my guest on the show. We've been very busy recording future episodes with fascinating guests, so be sure to subscribe to get notified when new episodes drop. And one personal favor, if you're watching this on YouTube, give us a like and subscribe. Those 2 simple clicks really help us expand our reach. If you're an entrepreneur or know someone who would make a great guest, I'd love to hear from you. Visit reluctantentrepreneur.podcast.com to apply or recommend a guest. You can also reach me directly at mike@reluctantentrepreneur.podcast.com. And a very quick shameless plug if you're interested in my book, The Reluctant Entrepreneur, Anatomy of a Business Startup from Uncertainty to Unstoppable. It's available in paperback and Kindle on Amazon and as an audiobook on both Audible and Amazon. Thanks again so much for listening or watching. Until next time, be unstoppable. I'll see you again soon.